So my story begins about 4 years ago. It was the summer in between my first and second year of graduate school, and I was back home visiting my family on the East Coast of the United States. I had been really struggling that past year with trying to synthesize all of the work that I had been doing. My work at the time was very related to human communication and how we use language and gesture and tone to communicate, right? So I was making videos and installations and sculptures, but everything felt very separate. And so during the summer, I was just struggling. And one night I decided to just put everything away and, just walk away from it for a moment. So I did that. I stepped outside the front door. I took 50, maybe 100 steps, and I looked up. I looked up to the night sky. And, without thinking, I just kind of asked, okay, what's next? What do I do? How do I make sense of this? And in that moment, I became conscious of what I was doing. I became conscious of that gesture of looking to the night sky. And I realized that this is a gesture that's repeated throughout time and across cultures. It's a gesture that connected me to the past, the present, and the future, right? It's a gesture that is made in faith, in hope, in mythology, and also in a search for knowledge. Especially in the 21st century, right? Space is our final frontier. It's the site of so many things for us here on Earth. It's representative of both hope and fear, right? It's a metaphor for the hopes and these fears that we experience in our social and our cultural and political climates here on Earth, right? So I realized in that moment that this effort of looking up was, in a sense, an effort to communicate to something else, something greater than us, right? So this moment also marked another very important realization for me, which was that, in fact, I didn't actually hate space like I previously thought, but in fact, I was afraid of it. Up until that moment, I had no way to connect to what was out there in the cosmos. There was nothing that I could tangibly grasp, or nothing that really made sense to me. But that moment showed me that there was something out there that I needed to investigate more deeply. And so that set me on this path of incorporating my work as an artist into the world of science. So the partnerships between artists and scientists are not new. They've been existing for centuries, but they have changed significantly in the past 50 years, especially in recent years, say the past 15, 20 years. Major institutions like NASA, the ESA, and CERN have developed artist in residence programs where they invite artists to come in and work with their researchers. In a recent article in the Smithsonian, these partnerships were labeled as creative collisions, and that artists and scientists work together as inspiration partners. Now that's a pretty big shift than where this partnership began centuries ago. See, for so long, art worked sort of at the service of science. Art was a tool for science. It was a way to illustrate the research and the knowledge that was being collected and founded by scientists all over the world. And many times these scientists themselves were the artists. They were drawing and illustrating the things that they were researching. For example, Etienne Trouvelot drawing sunspots in the 1870s, or Leonardo da Vinci, or John J. Audubon, or Ernst Haeckel. There's so many, that we can think of in this traditional notion of artist and scientist working together, right? But in a way, we kind of, I think in the everyday, we think about science and art as existing in opposite ends of the spectrum. They kind of act as dualities, like a hope and a fear, right? Art is the world of invention to science's world of fact. But I don't believe that to be true. So I realized that I needed to pursue this relationship. I needed to know more about how the cosmos worked, how these unseen forces at play in our lives affected us. Because my work is really about how we establish, how we perceive the world around us, the things that affect our lives on a day-to-day, and this includes untold, unseen, and seen forces, right? So I came to Warsaw just over a year ago as a US Fulbright Researcher. I came to work with the Nicolaus Copernicus Astronomical Center. I was their first artist, and still am, their first artist in residence. And so it was a real journey for both of us. I didn't know what to expect from them, and I know they did not know what to expect from me. I didn't even know at that point what the right questions were to ask. It was more of an intuitive, it was an intuition. I knew that I had to work with these people, and I thought that physics and astronomy would be the right home for me because in a way, as an artist, I deal with the intangible. And in a way, my work is an effort to make the intangible real. I use concepts, or I take the concepts that I think of, and I try and manifest them physically through sculpture or through photography or through installations. And in a way, even though there are many tangible things about space and physics, how do we physically relate to light? We can experience gravity, but, how do we physically relate to the stars? In a way, there's just this kind of inability to physically connect that really felt important to me. So about a year ago, I was at the Astronomy Center. They introduced me on my first day, and I had the opportunity to say a few words. So I'm going to just hop back for 1 second. I wanted to include this slide because this was important because it was this photograph is the first photograph of Earth that was taken from outside of our atmosphere. It's taken about 65 miles outside of the surface of the Earth from above the desert in the southwest United States. So this image was important because I wanted to share that back to this relationship of art and science and the history of it. We got this perspectival shift through photography, and it was only about 70 years ago that we were able to have this perspectival shift. And which allowed us to think more creatively, right? Because no longer was art needing to be a tool for science. Now we had photography to do that, right? And we had more advanced technologies. So anyway, back to my relationship with the Astronomy Center. I was there on this first day, and I introduced myself, and I thanked them for welcoming me into their fold, and I just kind of asked them to go on this journey with me. I said, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. I don't know what they are yet, and I just hope you'll be open to me asking and being curious, and I hope that you'll be curious about me and make use of me in this situation. So they really took me up on that quite immediately. And the first question that I was asked was, so are you going to paint our portraits? It's a totally legitimate question. It is. But a painter, I am not. But this question is quite innocent. It's totally legitimate, but it was really important because it showed me that I was existing in a world that was just as foreign to them as their world of science was to me, right? And I had this notion of what science was, and they had this notion of what art was. And these were moving in parallel lines, right? So what do I do as an artist? I am inspired by concepts within physics, within astronomy, concepts of light and space, and how we use these concepts to affect our daily lives and to build the realities that we live within on an everyday basis, right? So while I wasn't going to paint their portraits, I might have done something like this. So this was a piece. This was a piece that I made 2014. It was a video installation, as you can see. You used the Beach Boys, but for me, it was about our relationship to time and space. So I use things from my everyday life, things that I find important in my everyday life, like our relationship to space and time, right? But also concepts in spirituality, Eastern spirituality, traditional Chinese medicine, lifestyle blogs, reality TV, anything that I come in contact with is fodder for my work, along with the sounds I hear on the tram or at a meeting or in a concert. I collect these images and these sounds, and then I use materials from the everyday, like paint swatches or plastic or mirrors or light or glass or aluminum foil, and I use these materials that are well known in our everyday lives, and I combine them with these concepts that we also experience every day, and I manipulate them. I give them new movement. I give them new life through manipulating them, through layering them, through looping them, right? And through this new life, they have both a sense of familiarity and a sense of foreignness, right? So back to this relationship with the scientists. One of the most important things that I've learned this past year is that as artists and as scientists, we have a fundamental link. And it's not through this notion of intangibility, but rather it's through our sense of curiosity. And that as artists and as scientists, it is our nature to ask how and why, right? And that's why we do the work that we do, is because we are fundamentally curious about how the world works and why it works in the way it does. And not only the world, but ourselves, how we work together, how we work from the earth and from the cosmos, right? It's this universal sense for figuring out how to make the unseen seen, or how to put these puzzle pieces together, right? So it's this fundamental nature that links us. And when we come together as artists and scientists, we allow ourselves to think more critically and think more fluidly and see things from new perspectives, right? You bring an artist into a lab and a scientist into a studio, and all of a sudden we see from new perspectives. We're all educated to think in certain ways, right? Because if we had every opportunity open to us, where would we get? But when we open that back up again, once we've had some time and some experience, we are able to develop new answers to new questions all of the time, right? We're inspiration partners. One of my favorite films is a documentary by Werner Herzog. It's called Encounters at the End of the World. And in this documentary, he visits a place called McMurdo Station, which is a research base in Antarctica. And during the course of the film, he interviews a forklift driver. Well, at the site, he's a forklift driver, but in real life, he's a philosopher. So this forklift driver, Stefan Pashov, he asks him, how is it that we're all here at the end of the world? And Pashov responds, I think we all come to this place, this point at the end of the map. We come to this point where all of the lines of the map converge. And we have this intention to jump off the map because we are professional dreamers. And through us, the great cosmic dreams come to fruition. I've spent the world, I haven't spent the world, I've spent my life traveling the world, connecting to people and places, right? And fundamentally, I found that we are all asking the same questions and seeking the same answers. We are trying to figure out how to connect with one another, how to make the unseen seen, how to move together, into the future. And I think it is through us when we we allow ourselves to have these partnerships and work with people that are outside of our wheelhouses, we allow ourselves to dream bigger and think of new realities. We allow ourselves to invent and be more creative in how we problem solve, right? Because together, as artists, as scientists, as architects, as designers, as researchers, we have the obligation to dream. Thank you.